I've yet to meet someone who says, my meetings are the terrible ones. I need help fixing my meetings, right? But everyone who leads meetings has someone sitting in their meeting at some point saying, why am I here? A conversation can grow to the size of its fishbowl. So if you put an hour on the calendar, that meeting is going to take an hour. If you put it for 30 minutes, it'll take 30 minutes. There is no magic number of how much time you should spend in a given meeting. It's directly connected to what you're trying to accomplish.
Meet Heather. It's 8 p.m. and she's sitting on the living room sofa with a laptop screen glowing brighter than the television. She's sitting next to her husband, who's not angry, he's just a little disappointed. And so is Heather. This has become the new normal. But Heather doesn't know what else to do. As a senior product manager for an online retailer, her day was full of meetings. I'm talking back to back to back with no space for thinking, planning, or problem solving. Now the day is technically over, and she feels like she's just trying to catch up. Part of the problem is Heather tries to be everything for everyone. She feels like she's sprinting in a system that keeps asking for more. The work consumes her, but she doesn't feel fulfilled or satisfied by it. Productive on paper, but exhausted in real life, feeling like she has no control over her time. And the worst part about it is the spillover into her marriage or time that was supposed to be for resting and recharging. Heather wants to work with more intention. She wants to be able to have that time with her husband, to relax and to have less pressure on her team and to be able to go about her work where she doesn't feel that she needs to burn herself out just to stay afloat. Today, I'm speaking with Mamie Kanfer Stewart, author of Momentum and host of the Modern Manager podcast. Mamie has worked with thousands of managers and helped them to build stronger teams and smarter ways of working. And she's known for targeting one of the most common drains on time and energy at work: bad meetings. And I'm excited to hear how Mamie would help someone like Heather reclaim her time, protect her energy, and find a way of working that is more effective and efficient with her schedule. My name is Jay Abbasi, and welcome to Unstuck. Real people, real stories, real solutions. While the details are changed to protect anonymity, what you just heard is based on a true story of challenges that come up in the real world. And we discuss how to navigate these environments with practical tips to help you get unstuck and build a more fulfilling, impactful, and balanced life and career. So Mamie, I was reading about you that when you were 12 years old, you launched your own summer camp. Tell me that story, because I am curious as to why a 12-year-old launched their own summer camp.
Yeah, well, this is very indicative of my personality here. So as you'll see, I was, quote, forced to go to sleepaway camp for 3 years. My parents felt it was really important for me and my siblings to go away. My older sister had gone and loved it. And I was a very independent child. So my life in my mind at the time was, I have to go to school. I'm forced to be in this place all day long. I have to do all these things. Summer is supposed to be the time where I get to be in charge of myself. And lo and behold, I go to sleepaway camp where, once again, I have people telling me where to be and what to do at all times of the day. And I just could not stand it. So I wrote many letters to my parents explaining all the problems that I noticed at this camp, including things like, when we get up in the morning, first we have to go out to the circle where we do our morning prayer. Then we go have breakfast. Then we come back to our cabin where we clean up. Then we go back out to do this other activity. And I'm like, this is so the wrong order of doing things. Like, why are they not feeding us first? And why can't we clean up our cabin before we leave? And so it was all the things that were wrong with summer camp. I was like, you know what? I can do this better. I know how to create a camp that's going to be a lot more fun, a lot more well-organized, and puts the kids at the center of the experience. So I finally convinced my parents to let me try this one summer. And that was the birth of Camp Kanfer. And I hired my babysitter and her friends to be the official counselors because at 12, no parent wants their kid to be left with some 12-year-olds for all day long for a week. So they were the official counselors, but really I was running the show and I hired my friends to be the junior counselors. And I designed the camp. I made the flyers back in the day where you had to use these really old computer programs that were ridiculous. I printed them out on my mom's home computer and printer, mailed them out. And the first summer was magical. It was such a huge success. The kids had a blast. All the counselors had a great time. And granted, my parents lived on 29 acres. So we had a ton of land, including a stream where we could go climb through the river. We had a swimming pool so the kids could swim every day. So we had a ton of fun. And I thought maybe this would just be a one-year thing where I just got to prove to my parents I didn't need to go to sleepaway camp. I could keep myself busy and I could do this whole summer thing. But then parents started calling my mom saying, is Mamie going to run Camp Kanfer again? Because my kids won't let me sign up for the other camps until they know when Camp Kanfer is happening. So I ended up running this camp for 4 years before I moved on in my life to some other things. But it was one of those things that I never thought of it as, oh, I'm starting a business. I'm doing this thing that's so crazy. To me, it was just, I don't like this experience. I can make this experience better. So I should just do it. And so I did.
That's amazing. That's so incredible. You did it because of the kind of experience that you wanted to create and what you felt was right. And I think there's also, it sounds like, a part of you that just is a problem solver. Like you noticed the problem. Like you noticed the problem in the way camps were being run. And you're like, well, there's a better way to do this. So I assume that tendency is what has driven you to do some of the work you do today.
It is a direct line of sight for sure. It is one of those things where it's not that I'm an efficiency or productivity, obsessed person. It's actually more about the experience that I want to have a good experience when whatever I'm doing, whether I'm working with a team or I'm hosting people at my home. I want us all to have a good experience. I want everyone to walk away feeling like this was a good use of my time and I really enjoyed it. Not just that we got something done, but it was pleasant and enjoyable and enriching for me to be here in this conversation, in this environment. And that is the thread that is really carried through, which I think is an important nuance because a lot of people who are problem solvers, or at least many people who I talk to, look at it from an efficiency perspective. We need to be more productive. We need to get more done. We need to streamline and get rid of the friction for the sake of the outcome. And for me, it's really about for the sake of the people.
Yeah, I like that frame. In the end, what we experience is going to determine our sense of happiness and fulfillment, job satisfaction. And when we have that in a positive, or it's a positive experience, it then leads to that outcome. Then we get to all the good results, right? So tell me, I guess, when you realized, the way you realized the summer camp that was just not being run well, that there was a better way to do it. I'm sure you had that experience in a professional setting where you felt like, hey, the way this is being done is not working. Is there a story? Is there a time where you're like, this is when I really realized that this could be done better?
Yes, and it's everyone's favorite topic, meetings. So I should take a step back and say, I think part of the reason why I felt empowered to create my own camp was because I come from a family of entrepreneurs. And so starting your own business or running your own business was very much a part of the ethos that I grew up in. So when I first graduated from college, I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. I'd gone to art school thinking that I was going to be an artist, decided partway through art school that was not the life for me. I did not want to spend 8 hours a day in a studio by myself. I really wanted to do something with other people. So I ended up taking a kind of interim job working in my family's business, and I loved it. We would go to these meetings where people would laugh and debate. And I remember sitting next to somebody at one point who looked at me and was like, that person just argued with your dad. And my dad was the CEO. Like, is he going to get fired? And this was a new employee who was sitting next to me. And I was like, what are you talking about? Why would he get fired for like disagreeing? Like, no, this is how you have good, robust decision-making, is when people put their opinions on the table and they, fight for the points that they believe in. And it was just a magical, again, I love this word magical, because it really was a magical workplace. And then I went out in what I call the real world, and I got a job somewhere else. And I was sitting in a meeting, and it was dreadful. People were like droning on. There was no agenda. I was like, what is happening right now? Is this what meetings are like everywhere else, where people come unprepared? We don't really know what we're trying to accomplish. Nobody's really engaged. And this is taking 2 hours of 8 people's time. This can't be real. So I ended up going down this crazy path of trying to understand this meeting culture and what was going on with meetings everywhere. And I just started talking to people and saying, tell me about your meetings. If I was meeting you at a networking event, if I was chatting with a friend, if I was out at a bar, like, it didn't really matter where I was. I would just ask people, like, tell me about your meetings. And lo and behold, everyone had a story of a terrible meeting that they had been in, if not that day, then at least that week. And I thought, this does not need to be this way. Like, meetings don't need to be the bane of existence in the workplace. They can be a place where you get to share great ideas and brainstorm and build relationships and do all that fun stuff that happens when we collaborate. So that was the moment where I was like, I think I know what I want to do with my life now. I think I want to work on helping change meetings.
Yeah. We've all been there, Mamie. I have for sure. Yes. I've been in a meeting where I'm like, what am I doing here? Why are we wasting so much time? Why does that happen? I mean, in your work, like and working with so many groups and leaders on how to improve the way in which meetings are run and scheduled, why do we fall into this pattern so much? Why is it that every person that you spoke with has those meetings on a regular basis? I'm curious as to what you found as to the reason why this keeps happening.
There are a lot of reasons. So I'll try to touch on a couple of them. So first is that for meeting leaders, a lot of times the meeting that they're running, it actually is serving them. It's the participants who feel like this isn't working for me. And so there's this disconnect between when we're running a meeting and we think that this is a good meeting because we're getting what we need out of it, and what everyone else is experiencing. And we don't always notice this. And I say this because I've yet to meet someone, when I ask them about their meetings and terrible meetings that they've been in, I've yet to meet someone who says, my meetings are the terrible ones. I need help fixing my meetings, right? But everyone who leads meetings has someone sitting in their meeting at some point saying, why am I here? So I think there's a little bit of that that's underlying this, is that we don't recognize when we're part of the problem. Now, to get to kind of why are we part of the problem, this is where there are a couple other factors going on. So first is that we're not always clear about what we're trying to accomplish. We might know kind of instinctually in our mind what this meeting is about, but we haven't articulated out what the desired outcome is or what the goal of the meeting is. And we tend to think in activities. This meeting is to review the budget, or this meeting is to discuss the client situation, or this meeting is to brainstorm solutions to a problem. Those are wonderful activities, but they don't tell you what the outcome is. And so if we haven't defined the outcome, it's really hard to design the meeting to achieve that outcome. It means we're not totally sure who should be in the meeting and who just needs to be informed after. It means in the meeting, we haven't explained to the people who are there so that they know what we're trying to accomplish, so that they can then contribute effectively. And that's why we end up on all kinds of tangents and feeling like, wait a second, I thought we were trying to make a decision. No, maybe we're just discussing the options, but we're not actually going to make a decision. And it gets very wishy-washy, and you end up people contributing in ways that are less than helpful, or not contributing at all because they don't really know what they're supposed to be contributing. So we haven't clearly defined the outcome. So that's a second reason. And then the third, I would say, is that we kind of think of meetings as just this thing that we're supposed to know how to do, and that are kind of a necessary evil. And it's a mindset shift to say, no, meetings are actually a skill, just like giving feedback or setting goals. Yes, we do them all the time. We're in them all the time, but they're actually are processes and tools and ways to learn how to run meetings that will make them better. And if we take a step back and see that we need to develop these skills rather than just assume we know how to do them, then it starts to shift into, okay, meetings aren't just a necessary evil. They're actually something that I can put effort into and put some intention into to make them part of my productive workday.
Yeah. I feel like oftentimes what happens to Mamie is, let's say you are in an individual contributor role. You're attending these meetings and you see how a leader's running the meeting, and that leader, let's say, doesn't have that self-awareness around my meetings are the problem. They run a meeting a certain way, then the individual contributor gets promoted into a leadership role, and they just run the meeting the way they saw their leader run the meeting. They just think that that's the way it's supposed to be. And so, our listeners, I really want to call this out. You may be the problem. Don't take that the wrong way, right? Like, in other words, be open to the fact that it may be you. I feel like so often, maybe because I just feel like so often we hear advice like this and we think, yeah, other people, like the way they're running the meeting, they need to, and we're not really redirecting towards ourselves. And that was the first thing you brought up. So much of it is self-awareness, isn't it?
Exactly. And if you're in other people's meetings, there are things that you can do to help them improve their meetings without being in a position of power. And so for some folks, I find it helpful to take those same behaviors and just apply them to yourself. So if you're in someone else's meeting and you're like, I don't really know what we're trying to accomplish here, you can just simply ask, hey, I want to make sure that I'm able to fully contribute effectively here. Can you just tell me, what are we trying to accomplish in the next 45 minutes, right? Get them to articulate that. And then to reflect on yourself and say, okay, the meeting I'm about to lead, have I said what it is we're trying to accomplish? And you'll start to see and notice, oh, maybe my expectations of others and my expectations of myself haven't been fully aligned here. And so I need to make some small shifts as well.
Yeah. And talk to me about length of meetings, maybe, because I think this is problematic. I know that in the story with Heather that there's so many meetings on the calendar, and I assume that so many of them are lengthy meetings. I'm actually thinking about someone I recently spoke with where she left the company, and one of the reasons she left was she's like, Jay, it would be like 7 hours of meetings a day. And it was just overwhelming. So talk to me about how not only do we, yes, I agree, we have to have the outcome set and clear, but how much time we're spending in meetings.
Well, these things are very much connected because you don't know how much time you need if you don't know what you're trying to accomplish. So a conversation can grow to the size of its fishbowl. So if you put an hour on the calendar, that meeting is going to take an hour. If you put it for 30 minutes, it'll take 30 minutes. If you schedule it for 2 hours, it'll take 2 hours. But there is no magic number of how much time you should spend in a given meeting. It's directly connected to what you're trying to accomplish. So if you need an hour to get to that outcome, you should take an hour. But if you can do it in 20 minutes, you shouldn't take an hour. But how would you know if you don't know what you're trying to accomplish, right? So they're directly connected here. And another piece of this gets to the horrible, horrible standard of recurring meetings where we put them on the calendar and we have them every single week or every single month. And these meetings sometimes are the worst because they've been there forever. We do them because we've always been doing them. And so we just keep on doing them. And we never pause and say, what is this meeting really about? What are we trying to accomplish in this meeting? And is it designed appropriately to get us to that outcome? So again, if you have a 1 hour weekly meeting with your team, that's not good or bad. The question is, what's the purpose of that meeting? What are you trying to accomplish? And then you can figure out, is an hour the right amount of time? Is meeting every week the right amount of frequency? I don't know. I can't tell you until you tell me what you're trying to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely have had that experience too in the corporate world where there was a recurring meeting and it was just, all right, we're here. What are we going to talk about? It's like, what's on your mind? And it's, it's like, and you always fill up the time, but you leave that meeting with like, okay, well, what did we actually do? I'm curious as to your perspective on, let's say, a leader with their team for check-ins and one-on-ones. Like, I think that's a different thing than a meeting that we're attempting to get to a certain outcome. Or maybe it isn't. I don't know. Like, what is your perspective on how frequently leaders need to be meeting with their direct reports and so on for that kind of just that touch base, that sense of that offer of coaching and feedback. What are your thoughts on that?
So I like to separate, we'll call them check-ins from one-on-ones. Yeah. And let's start with one-on-ones, because I think these are really important, and a lot of managers kind of don't elevate them to the importance that they should be and can kind of push them off or cancel them when things get really busy. So to me, a one-on-one is really about putting the employee at the center and their growth and development and success. So these, I like to have them between once a month and once a quarter minimum. Mm-hmm. And they can range from 45 minutes to an hour, typically. And there are really three main topics of conversation, although you can modify and add things, based on your people, your role, your organization, your context, whatever's going on. So the first is kind of what is going well for this person? How can I give them appreciation, show that I'm seeing them grow and develop and do great work? So it's a built-in moment to say, I really see you and I can connect with you as a human and I can show you how much you're valued here. What are you developing? Where have I seen there have been struggles or opportunities for growth, things that I need to give you some feedback on, in addition to giving the regular real-time feedback? This is a dedicated moment to say, look, let's make a plan for this, not just a one-off, here's a thing I saw you need some work on, but let's actually build out a plan for helping you develop and grow. And then thirdly is, where are you trying to go in your career? What's important to you? How can I help you advance? So this is a place to have conversations about new opportunities, shifting roles and responsibilities, kind of enriching the person's life through educational opportunities. So those are kind of three core topics I always want to make sure we touch on. In addition to general, how are you? It's a little more spacious time to just get into a personal conversation that's beyond the daily, what's going on? How are you? Okay, let's do work. It's really a moment to just connect as humans. And then there are lots of other things you can talk about too. And you should always end with, and what feedback do you have for me? As your manager, what can I do differently to support you to be more effective, to make your life easier, to streamline your work, to help remove roadblocks, anything that I can do differently? This is your moment to ask. Because it's really hard for us as managers to get feedback from our team members. It can feel very threatening for someone to give us feedback. But if you ask them every single month when you meet them for these one-on-ones, you might eventually get something. And once you do, and you show them that you really listen and thank them for that feedback and you do something with it, it will get easier for them to give you feedback more regularly. So you're kind of building that into your one-on-one. So again, those simple structure, consistent, at least once a quarter, if not once a month or every other month.
Yeah. There are two things there at the end, that I really like that you said, Mamie, I want to highlight. The first one is, when you do ask that question, what feedback do you have for me? It's not a one and done. I think that's what happens for people, isn't it? It's like they ask once. They say, hey, do you have any feedback for me? The person says, no, I don't have anything. You're doing great. And they go, okay, I never have to ask again. Right? I never have to ask again. I'm doing a great job. I did it. Because, hey, let's be honest, when you ask that, you open yourself up to vulnerability. And you open yourself up to hear something that you may not like. So I love that you invite people to ask more than once, to be able to keep asking as a means to then get that person to open up. Because the second part about it is, on the receiving end, I'm just imagining being in that seat. If I'm in that seat where my manager keeps asking me, I'm definitely going to increase the likelihood of opening up, because of the fact that you've kept asking me. And I can tell that you really mean it. The first time I may be guarded, as you said, but if I continually receive or continually get asked, I could definitely see that opening me up to being more honest and direct, which would, of course, just improve the relationship.
Exactly. And there are some other things you can do in the way that you ask that can also help give someone a little more permission to share. So for example, if you come to them at the end of that one-on-one meeting and you say, I've noticed that one of the things you're really good at is keeping track of all of the moving parts for these projects. It's something I'm working on. I'd like to get better at keeping myself organized with so many different things happening. I'm wondering if you have any tips for me, right? So you're leaning into something that you see as their strength. You're acknowledging for yourself, this is already a weakness that you're aware of, and you're asking for their input. And sometimes it's easier for people to share tips than to give feedback. And it's easier for someone to share feedback if they know you're already aware that this is something that you struggle with. So the more that you can lay those things out on the table, the easier it will be for someone to give you their thoughts in an honest way. And that can then further move things along for the point where you say, do you have any feedback for me? Without putting things on the table and just having that open-ended question. And they'll know that, oh, the last time I gave maybe some thoughts, she responded really well. Let me try it again.
Yeah. There's an old approach to sales that just came to my mind because it's similar, right? I think you could actually bring parallels of sales into nearly every conversation. And the one I thought of was something I learned years ago, where if you ask somebody, what concerns do you have about this product, right? They may not surface something because they're holding back. They're afraid of, well, if I bring this up, then there could be some confrontation and the person can get defensive, and I just don't want to deal with that. And so the next question that I would ask if someone didn't respond with something specifically, I would surface a few. I'd say, well, some people, they bring up this, some people, they bring up that, some people, they bring up that. And just the surfacing of it then opens up the person to start to talk more about it. Because that's what you did there,
yes.
Which was you surfaced something that I see in myself, and then it opens up the conversation for the person to then offer you those kinds of either tips or feedback.
Yes, exactly. I love that.
And then the other thing that I really like is the tips. Like one of the things that I often teach people to do, I want to get your take on this, is it's essentially you're asking for a favor, aren't you? Right? You're asking for a favor, which is like, can you do me a favor? Can you help me with this? And when you frame it that way, it definitely opens people up more than continuously asking the same question of, can you give me feedback?
Very much so. And most people like it when someone asks us for advice, right? When someone's like, hey, do you know about this thing? Can you help me with it? Can you share your expertise? That feels really good in a way where asking someone, can you give me feedback? That can feel really scary. Right now I'm like, oh gosh, I have to give someone feedback about something. Like that's, I get nervous about how they're going to respond to it. But if you're asking me for advice, I'm like, oh, let me tell you, I got so much to say on this because I'm an expert. So it feels really, really different.
It's so true. It's so true. We love to give people advice. And it's like, I think that's it's a sign of a strong leader that they are able to ask for that kind of advice, to be humble enough to ask for advice, to seek out ways to improve, even from their own direct reports. So what I'm also curious to learn more about in regards to Heather's story, because one thing she's dealing with is just like this loaded calendar, It's like a full day of it. Some may be her meetings, some may be other people's meetings. And because of that, she doesn't have any time to do the actual work. It's just meetings all day, got to probably, eat a sandwich in the middle of the computer. And then at night, she's there on the sofa working instead of spending that time with her husband. So like, okay, how do you start to help someone, let's say, take inventory of how they're spending their time, meetings relative to time they spend working, and be able to find ways to improve their schedule? What's your process of how you work with people that way?
Yeah. Okay. I want to get to that in 1 second because we didn't talk about check-ins, and I just don't want to leave your listeners hanging on.
Oh,
Mamie
yes.
said there are one-on-ones and check-ins. So I'll say 3 seconds about check-ins, and then we'll talk about Heather. So check-ins to me are all about the work. This is where you're looking at where things stand, what's in the way, what problems need to be solved, what roadblocks need to be moved, what decisions have to be made. And those are as frequently as you need them. So if you need to meet with somebody every single day because you have a fast-moving project and you're like, we got to meet for 15 minutes every day and just make sure everything is aligned and we're moving, great. If it's something you meet once a week on or once every other week, that's fine. If you don't need to meet individually, you just meet as a team, that's fine. But and sometimes you don't even need meetings. Sometimes it's all happening by Slack or by email or some other system. But what you don't want to do is let your check-ins and your one-on-ones bleed into one thing. It's important to have focused conversations on the work and conversations on the person. So that's what I'll leave it at, just so we have time to talk about Heather, if that's okay with you.
I'm so glad that you circled back to the check-ins because it did slip my mind. Okay, what I just gathered there, and this is, I think, important to really be able to discern as a leader, is it really does depend on the season that you're in. In other words, like you have a high-pressure project, short timeline, then maybe you'd say, hey, this might actually be a time where you need to be checking in daily. And if, let's say, it's a different scenario, it may be once a week, it may be in a group setting. So in other words, what you're saying is don't just set these check-ins blindly that they're just always this way. It could be, I guess, but what you're saying is really consider what the needs are of the business, the needs are of how many conversations need to be had, and then design their frequency of check-ins accordingly.
Very, very much so. And also the use of other tools. So if you have a good culture of using a project management tool of sorts, you might need less frequent check-ins because you're all keeping track of work and what's going on through your project management tool. If you are not using a project management tool or you're not using it consistently, you might need more meetings because that becomes the place where you're sharing information and getting aligned on what's happening. Now, I don't like sharing the information as a reason to meet, but sometimes people need that space to just get all the ducks in a row and answer questions, share updates, things like that. So if you're talking about a short 15-minute meeting, fine. I would not spend an hour sharing information in a meeting. And that's a whole other conversation we can have. There are many other tools that are much better for sharing information than meetings. So check-ins really season, yes, absolutely. What's going on with the work? And what other communication tools are you using? And how can you use those to supplement meetings so that meetings don't have to be the default for everything?
Yeah. And I really want to encourage everyone listening to consider a 15-minute check-in as enough time for many types of check-ins. I learned this through experience years ago when I worked at Tesla and we had these crazy timelines and it was always something that needed to get done fast. We had these 15-minute huddles, maybe. It was a 15-minute huddle. It would be the leadership team along with the head of training, and it would go for always 15 minutes. We rarely went over. And it was 15 minutes to touch base, how we're doing on our specific responsibilities within the project, give everybody an update so that we were all aligned. And it never felt like a waste of time. If anything, it was energizing. It was really helpful to be able to touch base because we were scattered all over the country. And so I say this because I want our listeners to realize this does apply to you. If you're like, well, no, but my meetings need to be an hour. I assure you, they don't necessarily. You can get a lot done in 10 or 15 minutes.
Especially when you know what you're driving towards, right? If the goal of that meeting, that check-in, is to make sure that everybody has the information they need to be able to do their work for the next day, 2 days, 3 days, however long between, that's very clear. That's enough that you can get done in 15 minutes. If your goal is to also collectively problem solve or brainstorm and make decisions, 15 minutes may not be enough. One of the ways that I like to work with managers around this is to say, if you have a 15-minute meeting that's all about getting aligned like that, and there are issues that people are sharing, don't solve them in those 15 minutes. Have on your calendar reserved the next 30 minutes afterwards for problem solving or brainstorming or issue addressing. And only the people who are relevant for that conversation stay on after the 15 minutes. Everyone else gets to sign off and be done. That way, you're not ignoring the fact that there might be some issues that are going to come up, but you're not requiring a bunch of people to sit in a meeting that really shouldn't be there anymore. So you get out of the way the most important things that matter for everyone, and then you let people go, and only those who need to stay.
Yeah, because it's so draining to just be on one of those calls or in that room and you're just like sitting there and it's not relevant. It's so draining. And I think a leader
Mm-hmm.
really needs to know that. They really need to be self aware enough and have the emotional intelligence to realize that they are wasting someone else's time. And like you said earlier, that has such a negative impact on their experience. So I think that transitions well into Heather's situation because when someone does have a day full of meetings, some may be hers, some may not be hers. How do you encourage a leader to work through that?
So, one of the first things to do is really get a sense of the kinds of meetings that you're in and which ones are good use of your time as they are, which ones could be better. Like you still feel like you need to be in these meetings, but maybe they're not designed very well, and which ones you're really just not sure about. And you just know they're not a good use of your time or they're really just super draining and we need to do something about them because they can't just stay the way they are. For the meetings, you're like, yep, these are working really well. These I really need to be in. They're high impact and high importance. We don't need to worry about those yet. Let's just let those be. For the meetings where you're like, I'm not so sure about this one. Like, I think I need to be here. It seems to be really good use of like the reason I'm here is important, but I'm not sure they're designed well. If you're a guest in those meetings, if you're a participant, this is where talking to the meeting leader can seem scary, but is really worth it. And there are lots of simple phrases that you can use to start those conversations. Things like, we have this meeting on the calendar every week. Like I'm trying to build more time into my day because I have so many different things I have to prioritize. I'd really love to understand a little bit more about what you're trying to accomplish in these meetings to make sure that I can really show up ready, or I'm considering having a team member step in. It's a good growth opportunity for them. I'm wondering if there's something that I uniquely am bringing to this meeting that potentially would be lost if I have my team member step in, or is this an opportunity for them to grow? So you can start to have some of these conversations to articulate out, is this meeting really where I need to be without even getting to the point of redesigning the meeting? But do I really need to be here? Does this person who's running the meeting think that I'm really important? And if yes, why? And if they're like, no, it doesn't really matter if you're there, Mamie, we just need somebody from finance to be in this meeting. Great. Maybe there's another team member who you could develop and would love to be in this meeting and meet team members from across the organization or have an opportunity to represent your department in a space where they haven't had that opportunity before. So you can use it as a way to not, shove off this terrible meeting onto someone else, but to buy back your own time and to do it with some intention when you're asking somebody else to step in for you. So those are kind of two different conversations you can have when you're not the meeting leader.
Now,
if you are the meeting,
go
ahead.
I just want to jump in before you, and I want to hear if you are the meeting leader. What I'm curious to highlight here was the fact that you said it's a conversation, meaning it's not an email. It's
Correct.
it's not a Slack, right? It's not a Slack message. It's not a Teams message. You're saying this is a conversation, either in person or if that's not possible, over a Zoom call or Teams call, correct?
Exactly. And look, we all are super busy. Everybody knows that. If you say to a meeting leader, can we grab 10 minutes? I'd like to talk about my participation in these meetings. And you explain, I'm running all these things, I had all this stuff going on. Like, I really want to make sure that when I'm showing up, I'm contributing as best as I can and that I'm able to balance out my other responsibilities. Very few people are going to respond to you saying, well, that's ridiculous. Why can't you do everything? Like, if somebody does say that to you, you have a much bigger problem in terms of a toxic work culture, right? Most people are really receptive to this idea that we are all overscheduled, overwhelmed. And we also know that people miss meetings all the time. If you are out sick, if you're on vacation, if you are double booked, like, we do know how to say no to meetings. We just don't like to say no when we could be in the meeting. So by having this conversation with a meeting leader, you're basically saying, look, I am open to being in these meetings. It's not that I don't want to be here. It's that I have a lot of priorities and I want to make sure that I'm using my time wisely. And I want to make sure that you're getting what you need from me or my department or my team so that your meetings can be productive for you. So
Yeah.
yes, absolutely has to be a conversation.
Yeah. And in that conversation, I want to call out that you use or you explain your why behind it. So in other words,
hmm
you first state, hey, I'd like to talk about the Tuesday weekly recurring meeting that we're having about XYZ. And then the next thing was the why, which is I'm trying to go through my own schedule and ensure that I'm using my time in the best way possible. And I'm exploring all the meetings on my calendar. So that part's, you can't miss that part. You can't just go into like, hey, I want to talk about that meeting. Do I need to be on it? Like you can't, like you have to include that why part, maybe, because I do think that it then creates, first, a more respectful conversation, and it opens the person up to seeing it from your perspective, and then being able to be more open to different options rather than just them going to, no, this is a meeting that you need to be on.
Yes, absolutely. And if there are some other things too, like I don't want to go too deep in all the meeting stuff, but if we stop seeing meetings as an event and really understand them as a cycle where there's a before, things that happen before the meeting, the planning and the preparation, there's the during, which is of course in the meeting time, and then there's the after, all the follow up and follow through that happens. There are moments where we can say, I really don't have the ability to continue participating in this meeting. But I'm very happy to find ways to contribute beforehand. So if you want to send me the pre-meeting materials, I am happy to shoot you back some thoughts that you could bring into the meeting on my behalf. Or I'm happy to take on any responsibilities that come out of this meeting. So if someone can share the meeting notes with me afterwards, I'd be happy to make sure that any tasks that are assigned to me get followed through on, right? So if we start to expand how we see meeting participation from just having to be in the meeting to contributing before or after, we also open up opportunities to take back some of that meeting time, but still not miss out on being a contributor or being engaged.
Yeah, I love that perspective because it isn't either a binary kind of thing where it's either you're in the meeting and you spend the whole hour, or you are completely disconnected from the group. There are other ways that you can contribute. Okay, so now you were saying, if let's say in Heather's case it's her meeting, she's leading the meeting, then what?
So one of the things I like to do is have a meeting about your meetings. So this is meeting with your team and looking at the kinds of meetings that you have and asking them, do we really need all of these? Right? Sometimes you don't have to make the decision on your own. You can actually engage the people that you're meeting with, especially if you have a lot of recurring meetings that are taking up your time. Just sit together for an hour usually, and I have a kind of a flow we tend to follow around looking at what are all the meetings that our team has, and are they serving us well? And if not, how can we redesign them so that they are? And sometimes that means making a meeting longer but less frequent. Sometimes it means completely eliminating something and shifting it to something we do in our project management tool over Slack or some other kind of way. And sometimes you find that actually sometimes these meetings are good, but just not always. So maybe we just don't need to have them all the time. They just need to be more of an ad hoc rather than a recurring meeting. But it starts by just getting a sense of, again, what meetings are working for us and what meetings aren't. And not just for me, but for my team. Because it has to be about the collective, right? It can't just be, again, where we started of, well, this meeting is working for me, but it's not actually working for anyone else. Assume that whatever meeting you're running isn't working for anyone, and then let them prove you different. Let the group help shape what's the best use of our collective time. And are there things we could do before the meeting so that we can meet for fewer hours? Maybe I need to send a voicemail before the meeting, giving people context. That way, when we get to the meeting, I don't have to spend 20 minutes presenting. That in and of itself can save a ton of time.
Yeah. A meeting about meetings. I like it. I think we know this with so much within business, which is we're supposed to pause, reflect on our past quarter or whatever it is, then look ahead. And for business strategy, of course, everyone agrees that makes sense. And what you're saying is this applies to how you're setting up your meetings. It's a moment of pause to reflect on, okay, how much productivity or the results that we're getting from these meetings, and then looking ahead, what can we do differently? I think that's something that's valuable to do more than once even. I mean, that could be something that you do every quarter.
So absolutely, at least once a quarter, or sorry, at least once a year. But you could also do it once a quarter, or you could even do it once a month and just pick one meeting at a time to focus on. So maybe the first month, you're just going to look at your one-on-ones and say, how are these going for folks? Are we using them well? Are we having them enough? Do we have a clear and consistent agenda that we follow every time? And then the next month, you might look at your team meetings and say, how often are we meeting as a team? And do we have the right outcome that we're driving towards in these meetings? Are we clear why we're even having them? Do we need to shift those around? And the next month, you could pick something else, like your project kickoffs, or you could pick a work planning meeting, or whatever it is that you have. But I want to pull out one other thread on this, which is the more consistently structured your meetings can be, the easier it is to plan for them, the easier it is to facilitate them, and the more likely you're going to get good engagement and drive to your outcome afterwards. If every meeting is a custom meeting, it's exhausting. It's exhausting to plan. It's exhausting for other people to figure out how I'm supposed to participate. But if you know that any time that you're having a kickoff meeting, it's the same agenda. We just fill in the blanks around the specific project, the goal. I figure out who needs to be here for this particular work. I know the activities we're going to do. I know the template we're going to use for our project kickoff documentation. It just makes everything so much smoother and saves you a ton of time and energy because you don't have to now redesign something from scratch.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I can sense potentially someone thinking, yeah, but I kind of like that spontaneous, like just whatever, let things fly. I think there is a time and place for that, for a certain type of meeting, right? When there's just brainstorming. What you're saying though, I mean, when you have that kind of structure, it definitely improves the quality of the meeting in regards to the results, but also what everybody else is experiencing and what they come to expect. Because they're like, okay, this is the routine we go through. We kind of get into this meeting, we flow through it, and it has some consistency. I think there's so much value to that. So maybe I want you to imagine if you were to meet, let's say, Heather in this story, and she's telling you about her struggles of what she's going through. She's overwhelmed by the amount of pressure that she's under because of all the meetings on her calendar, and she feels like she has to work late, and it's affecting her mindset. It's burning her out. What would you ask her, Mamie? Or maybe a few questions you might ask her. What would you ask her and why?
So one of the questions I would start with is, where does she feel like she has control, and where does she feel like she's at the mercy of others? And a lot of times what I see when I talk with clients about this is their mindset is one of, I have no control over my calendar. Everyone else puts meetings on my calendar. I have to have all of these meetings with my team because my people expect it of me. And therefore, there's very little I can do about it because I'm out of control. And when we really start to kind of pull back the layers of the onion, we realize we have way more control than we realize. We might not have total control. There might always be meetings where if my boss says I have to be here, I have to be here and I don't get a say. But short of that, there's actually a lot of control we have over how we spend our time, how we block time for things and say that we're available or not, how we design those meetings to be the length of time that we have decided is the appropriate amount of time to spend on a topic. But you have to believe that you have control if you're going to start to make change. So that's the first thing. Yeah. The second question I would ask her is, what would happen if you said no to a meeting? Like really, what would happen? Not because you're sick and not because you're on vacation and not because you're double booked, but because you've just looked at your calendar this week and said, you know what? These are the things I need to get done. These are my biggest priorities for work. These 2 meetings don't align to those priorities. I was invited to them and I'm going to say no anyways, because these other things are more important. Like, is the world really going to crash? Are you going to get fired? Are things going to fall apart without you? Probably not, because if you had a reasonable, quote, reasonable excuse to say no to those meetings, you would say no and the world would continue turning. So going back to control, it relates there again, but getting into that place of identifying what are your priorities, and then if there are meetings that don't align, feeling like you have permission to say no. So that's kind of a second space. And then a third question I would ask is, what can you do differently regarding your calendar to protect time for yourself? What choices can you make around time that you intentionally block out to say, I'm just not available on Wednesdays from 3 to 5. I'm having a meeting with myself. So what are some of the little things that you could do to start to protect time for yourself, knowing your own need for deep work, your need for time in the day to eat lunch and take a walk and rejuvenate and take a break, a mental break? So what are some of those things that you might do? And let her brainstorm out, what could I do differently when I look at my calendar? And start from that.
Yeah. Powerful stuff. It's a major shift in mindset that a lot of people need to make. And it's so important in today's world because we are constantly being asked to do more with less. And if you don't take control over how your time is being spent, the outcome will be you will get burned out. You just will, because the pressure is going to build and build. So I really encourage everyone to be intentional about what Mamie just shared there. I think this is a lesson all of us can learn. And to learn more about the great work Mamie is doing, you can go to themodernmanager.com/overview. And there's information about your coaching, the workshops that you have, and the trainings. I encourage everyone check it out, themodernmanager.com/overview. And everything is there for people to learn a little bit more. Mamie, this was amazing. This was incredible. Thank you so much. I took a lot of notes personally. I'm going to consider my own inventory of meetings with my team and some things that I think I'll be sharing with others. So I really appreciate you taking some time today to chat with me.
Oh, thanks so much, Jay. This is so much fun. I always love talking about meetings. And I really hope that everyone goes home and looks at their calendar and, makes one small shift. And at the very least, figure out what your goal of your meeting is.
Mamie was so excellent to chat with. We had an interview on her podcast as well, The Modern Manager, which was phenomenal. She's just great at hosting a guest. She asks great questions. So feel free to check out that episode and other episodes she has on her podcast. You'll get a lot from it. So let's get into it. 3 insights, 3 actionable takeaways that I think will be able to add value to you and your work as you move forward. The first insight, the person who runs the meeting almost never thinks they're the problem. And in that, there's an awareness gap. Because here's the deal. In every meeting, there's at least one person in the room wondering why they're even there. So start with self-awareness. Recognize if it's you that could be the problem. And oftentimes, right, it is us. We have to just be more aware of that because we're often running a lot of these meetings. Second insight, running meetings is a skill. I like how she said it. She said, you wouldn't assume you know how to cook because you've eaten your whole life. Right? Just because you watch someone else doesn't mean that you know how to do that activity well. If you watch someone else run a meeting, doesn't mean that you know how to, because what if that person's running the meeting poorly? So don't make that assumption. Treat it like a skill that you can cultivate. Third insight, meeting participation isn't binary. What I mean is just being in the meeting is not the only way to contribute towards whatever the reason is for having the meeting. You can participate beforehand, after the fact. You can take on an action item without having to be present in the meeting. You don't need to be in every single one of these meetings. Actionable takeaways, first of 3. 1, define the outcome before you design the meeting. Don't think in terms of activities. Think in terms of outcomes, results. Be able to state what it is you're trying to accomplish. One of my favorite questions is, what does good look like? Start there before you even send a meeting invite. Second actionable takeaway, ask for feedback as a favor, not as a request. So if you just say, hey, you have any feedback for me? That's not going to do it. But if you ask, hey, can you do me a favor? Or, I know you're really good at this, whatever this is, which is something I'm working on. Do you have any tips for me? People love to give advice. They love to share their wisdom. So give them the chance to do so, rather than asking them to give feedback, which people don't really like doing. third actionable takeaway, have a meeting about your meetings. I love that. Have a meeting about your meetings. Maybe it's once a quarter. Just sit with your team and really review. Are all these meetings necessary? Do we want to reduce some of these? Which ones are effective? Which ones aren't? What could be replaced with email or maybe a newsletter of sort, or Slack messages or Teams messages? Don't ever make this decision alone, by the way. That's never a good approach. Make it as a group so that everyone is aligned on how you're all spending your collective time together. Join us on Friday's episode. I have recently encountered some fascinating research by the University of Chicago, and it blew my mind. And it's related to this topic because one of the reasons why we run out of time in a day is because we get distracted. And this study is all about cell phone use and how it affects our cognitive abilities. It's scary because it's not only about when you're on your phone. I'll tell you more about it on Friday. So until next time, thank you so much for listening.